Now, control flow statements in SQL Server, they manage the flow of execution of the SQL script, it is or a stored procedure. So these statements, they allows conditional execution of loops and branching, similar to control structures in other programming languages. So the first one we have if else. So we've already used if else previously. So the if else executes a block of code uh, of SQL statement if the specified condition is true, and another block if the condition is false. And then we have the while loop, which we've already also used. So actually here we use the while loop. Um, the while loop executes a block of code as long as the specified condition is true. And then we've got begin and end, which we've also used. So begin and end defines a block of code statements. It's often used with a flow control of flow statements to group multiple statements. Then break and continue exits the nearest closing loop. And then continue causes the loop to skip the rest of its body and immediately retest its condition prior to reiterating. Now, just to explain this, so imagine if maybe you're following a certain recipe to bake a cake. So you're executing, like it's like executing an SQL script, and you come across various decisions. So those you can take them as a flow of control statement. So if else, if you have eggs, there's a condition, use them. Otherwise, use a substitute. So it's deciding between steps based on what you have. And then while, with the while loop, keep mixing the batter, meaning execute the statement as long as it's not smooth, meaning that's a condition that it must be true. So you keep on mixing that batter until it's smooth. Then begin and end, you group related steps like missing dry ingredients in one bowl and then the wet ingredients in another bowl before you combine them. And then break and continue. If you find maybe a shell in the batter, which is a specific condition, you remove it and continue mixing. So if it's a right consistency, meaning another condition, stop mixing, meaning end the loop. So these structures, they just guide the process, just ensuring the cake it turns out correctly, much like how the control of flow statements guide the execution of the scripts. So we've been using our employees table structure, so we'll continue to make use the table structure to demonstrate how the flow control statement in SQL Server can be applied to the real world database operations related to the employees table. All right, suppose we want to allocate bonuses to the employees based on their department. So employees in IT department receive 10% bonus, while other employees in other department receive 5%. So we could have a statement, a query like this. So we could declare a department. So we have a variable department there. And then in that variable, we will store IT. And then we declare another variable. Of the percentage, bonus percentage, which is going to be decimal. Now, we're going to use the if else statement. So we say if at department is IT, then we set at bonus percentage 10.0. or else everyone else gets 5%. And then we actually print some message there. Bonus percentage. And then plus, and then we want to cast bonus. Let me just go ahead and copy this. It's a long word, so I'm just gonna go and copy. So cast is used to convert one data type to another. So we're changing the bonus percentage, which was decimal, into varchar, varchar, and then we want to concatenate with a percentage. So we can see now that the bonus percentage is actually 10.00%. So remember here, we want to allocate bonuses to employees based on their department. And employees in IT department receive 10% bonus, while the others, they receive 5%. Now we can also use the while loop. So let's say we want to use the while loop to increment salaries. Imagine incrementally increasing the salary of employees in a specific department by, let's say, 1,000 rand until it reaches a threshold. For simplicity, let's increment salaries for HR department until the salaries reaches 60,000. Okay, so I'm just gonna add a new query. I'm gonna come back to that one. So we will declare a variable, declare salary, which is int, let's say 60,000, and then we can declare at current salary, and we select current salary, and then we store max salary from employees, where department is HR, and then while at current salary is less than at max salary, then begin, and then update employees, set salary to salary plus 1,000. So we keep on increasing it until it reaches a threshold. So where department is HR and salary is is less than max salary. So for the people who have less than max salary, keep it on increasing until we get to 60,000. And then let's select just to see, select at current salary, and from employees, where department is HR. All right. So here in this example, we're just increasing the salary of employees in a specific department, which is HR, by 1,000 until it reaches the threshold. Now, if you need to update the department of an employee and perhaps log this change in an audit table, we could easily use begin and end to group these operations together. So for example, we can declare a variable, declare excuse me, spelling, declare at employee ID, let's say as an integer, and then I'm just gonna have employee ID. So this is just an example employee ID, and then we can also declare another variable, and let's call it new department. And then maybe this is marketing. And then we can actually begin transaction. Then we want to update the employees department. Let me just make a comment here. So we update the employees department. So we'll say update employees, set department set department to add new department. And then where employee ID, okay, let's just remove this, where employee ID is employee ID. Then we're gonna actually log the change. Excuse me, spelling of update, but it's just a comment, it doesn't really do anything. So then we actually log the change. Then we can just say insert into a department change log. And then we pass the employee ID and the new department. Now we do not really have that table, so we're not going to execute this, and then we can specify the values at employee ID and then the new department, and then we commit the transaction. Commit transaction. All right, so we're not going to execute because we do not have a table called department change log or anything like that. So this is just an example of using beginning and or begin, actually not beginning, so begin and end for complex operations. So in this example, let's say we need to update the department of the employee and also log this change in the audit table. So we do not have the audit table, so we can easily use begin and end just to group these operations together, just like we did here on the example. Now we also have another example of a break and continue. So now let's say we iterating through employees ID, and we want to skip processing for those in HR, who's in HR department. So we can stop the loop. So meaning stopping the loop when reaching the last known employee ID. So we could actually achieve this. I'm just gonna switch here quickly, and then we're gonna come back to this one. Um, let's say we declare at current ID. Let's say maybe that is just one. Let's say the current ID is one. And then we also declare another variable, let's say at max ID. So then we will actually select, let's just fix the display. Select max employee ID from employees. So here we sort of missing that operator here, and then we're gonna run a loop while at current ID is less or equal at max ID, and then begin, and if select department from employees where employee ID is at current ID, and then we said we want to skip HR department. At current ID, and then just increment by 1, and then continue. And then we're gonna just process employee process employee. So we're just gonna print a simple statement, a simplified statement. So we print processing and then what we want, we also gonna just cast it to varying characters. And then if at current ID is at max ID, then we will actually break. And then I'm just gonna set at current ID. Now so here let's just break down the statement. We've used the while loop to iterate through the range of employees ID from 1 to the maximum employee ID that is found in the employees table. So first we've declared the current ID variable, and then we initialized it with 1. So we need that will this actually initializes a variable starting at 1, which represents the first employee ID to the process. And then we also declared another variable here. So this determines the highest employee ID in the employees table, and it stores it in its variable in the max ID. So this value sets the upper limit for the loop, ensuring that the loop iterates through all the existing employee IDs. And then we have the while loop here on line 3. So this is a while loop. We have the condition there, as long as the condition says as long as the current ID is less than or equal to the maximum ID or to the max ID, the loop continues to iterate. So this ensures that the loop covers all the employees IDs from the first to the last. And then we have in the if statement here. So the if statement checks if the current employees department is it HR using the subquery. So we say if select department from employees where employee ID is current ID and is equals to HR. All right. So meaning if the employee belongs to the HR department, then the script increments the current ID by 1 and it uses continue to skip further processing for these iterations and move directly to the next iteration of the loop. Now, so if the employees they do not belong to the HR department, meaning if the condition was false, right? If the if condition was false, the script executes print statements to actually simulate processing the employee. So print processing employee. So that's what we're actually doing here, right? So this just demonstrates the placeholder action for each employee that's not in the HR, like updating the records or maybe generating the reports. And then we've got the loop incrementation, increment and termination. So after processing an employee or skipping the HR, the script checks if the current ID has reached the maximum ID. So if it's true, then it uses the break to exit the loop and all of the employees have been processed. Otherwise, it will increment the current ID by 1. and then we set add current ID equals to our current ID plus 1, just to move to the next employee's ID in a sequence and continue the loop. So just to explain what the control flow statements, imagine that maybe you're a coach of a sports team. So you're checking each player's gear before the game. So you go through each player's locker, each so this can be each employee's records in our case, just in a order from the first player to the last. So if the player belongs to a specific group like HR department, that doesn't require a gear check. So you just keep their locker and then move to the next one. So for everyone else, you ensure their gear is in order. So you process the records, you continue the process until you've actually checked the last player's locker. So you've reached the maximum employee ID in our case, ensuring that everyone is ready for the game. All right. Now, using these control flow statements is like directing a group of hikers, right? Like maybe you've got it, we can think of hikers as SQL operations through a trail, which is the database task. Okay, so the if else acts as a decision point. uh, so you take the left path for the scenic view, or the right for a shortcut. So the while loop is like walking in cycle until you find a landmark, and then begin and end, it groups actions that must be taken together, like maybe setting a camp in our analogy, and break and continue uh, decide whether to stop for a break or keep on continuing a trail. All right, so each ensures the journey, meaning the data manipulation, is performed correctly and efficiently based on the conditions that encountered.